Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at the new Principled BSDF material that is the new default in LightWave 2018. We're going to go through all the attributes one by one and see what they do. First we have the color that is pretty self-explanatory, except that in this new material it only affects the diffuse, or if we have specular tint, the specular will also tend towards this main color. Next up we have roughness. If we tweak it, we see that on the edge of the object we see an effect called retro reflection that makes the surface look more rough. And let's go to a more wide angle camera and look at the same effect. It is very subtle, but it makes the object look much more rougher than just a standard Lambert diffuse model like we had in the previous versions of LightWave for the standard material. Next up is the specular. When it's at 0, it has no effect, but if I add even a little bit of specular, we can see that it has a Fresnel effect by default. We can see the edges reflect the backdrop much more than the in front of the object. Now if we increase roughness, the diffuse roughness and the specular roughness and also the transparency, i.e. the refraction roughness, are all tied to this one roughness value, and we can control how much the material reflects light by tweaking the specular value, and it will reflect more light at the on the surfaces pointing towards the viewer. The next option is the specular tint. It is similar to the color highlight we had in the previous standard material in previous versions of LightWave, and we can take a look at the difference between the shading models. I've set up another camera and another object so we can see the difference clearly. I'm going to turn up the specular on the standard and turn up the color highlight, and I'm going to try and match the glossiness a little bit. As you can see, it's a little bit flatter than the BRDF we have in the principled material, which is the Trowbridge Reeds model, and it has a longer tail on the specular highlights, and we can try and match the surface by increasing the metallic, and now we have a direct comparison of a metallic standard surface as it would have looked like in previous versions of LightWave, and on the right we have what it looks like now, and it has a much softer look, which is more physically correct than the old shading model we had. Let's switch back to single view. Choose the camera for the principled. So that covered the metallic setting. And now we are going to take a look at the sheen setting. If we increase it, you can see there's a sort of velvety reflection on the rim of the object, and you can see it change if I rotate the rim light. You can see it disappears when the camera is pointing or the light is reflected towards the viewer at the front of the object. And when I rotate the camera at the edge, you can see that it's more cloth-like. I can increase the sheen effect so we can look at it better, and it produces a more cloth-like or a velvet look. We can also tint the sheen. We have a sheen tint percentage, and so you can do more metallic, let's say, looking cloth. Next up we have the thin mode, and I have set up a separate scene for the thin mode so we can see how it affects the surface. It is a type of translucency. I have set up 100% translucent in the scene, and I've put a spherical light behind the surface, and you can see it has both diffuse and translucency weighed evenly with this single translucency attribute. If I go in front and turn off translucency, we're not going to see anything, and if we set it to 100%, we can see it fully. And then we have a flatness parameter, which makes the translucency a little bit more flat and spreads out the light a little bit more. And the translucency also is affected by GI correctly. If we rotate the camera, we see that we have a very bright translucency effect on this edge of the plane, and it is shining through this other plane here. Let's switch back to our main. Next up is subsurface. This is subsurface scattering. You can select its level by tweaking the attribute, and you can see that the object changed into a very soft object, passes through light. The subsurface color is just a multiplier for the effect, so you can get the exact color you want. And then we have the distance of the subsurface scattering effect. If I lower it, the object starts to become more and more diffuse, as if subsurface scattering was not enabled. And I increase it, and it becomes increasingly soft. You can blend the diffuse and the subsurface just by tweaking the subsurface percentage. Now you get say 50% diffuse and 50% subsurface scattering. I can change the diffuse color, and you can still get the artistic effect you want because the colors are separate. Next up is Luminous. This is exactly like before. It is the luminosity of the surface. but this time it has its own color, so you have control over that as well. We covered metallic, but let me turn it on again so we can see the second attribute a little bit better, which is called anisotropic. It is very easy to control. I've set up a default UV map, and when we have a default UV map set up in Modeler, the anisotropic effect follows that UV map and generates the anisotropic direction automatically. You can also use our new projection nodes in the node editor for different types of projections. We have cubic, cylindrical, front projection, planar, spherical, and a UV. And if I use spherical, I can just connect the projection to the projection input of the Principled BSDF. And when I increase the anisotropic attribute, we can see that the object becomes anisotropic. And next we have the rotation attribute, which makes it very easy to rotate the anisotropic direction however you want. A 50% rotation means it has been rotated 90 degrees, and 100% makes it 180 degrees, so it's the same as if it was 0. Next up we have Clearcoat. That is also a Fresnel based effect, but it is applied on top of either the metallic or the specular effect, so you can make car paint, for example, very easily, or polished porcelain, or anything with a clear coat. The roughness value does not affect the clear coat. The clear coat has its own glossiness value, so you can tweak the glossiness of the clear coat. Next up we have transparency. I'll just make the object fully transparent, and it is tied to the refraction index naturally. And the next attribute is the transmittance, which is new, and it's made to simplify for you to set up a dielectric type absorption that we had before. I can just click on it, select blue, and now we have a blue absorption effect. And the transmittance distance is now a much easier value to adjust. The transmittance distance means that when the ray, it is the distance the ray has traveled at which the transmittance color is fully applied to the ray. So if I decrease it to 20 centimeters or 200 millimeters, we can see that the effect becomes darker because the transmittance color is fully realized at a much closer distance. And of course the refraction index is the same as before. It controls the Fresnel of the reflection and also the refraction for when you have the transparency set to 100. This material is a layered material, so when I use transparency of 100%, it becomes essentially a full dielectric with all the appropriate Fresnel effects, but I can still lower it and blend all these other values into the mix. I can even make it 50% metallic, the reflection, or the metallic is completely overriding the transparency, but I can make the specular highlight show up if I just lower up the transparency, and I can also blend in the diffuse. Hopefully that'll give you an idea of how the new default material works, and I'll see you next time.